Hey, hi. Nato Gyro here. Apologies for my voice. I have a cold, but I'm about to leave for New Zealand, so I have to do this while I can. But in this particular case, I'm here with Milligin of speedrunning fame. He's active on Twitch and does a lot of thoughtful and deep analysis of Deep Rock Galactic. I've linked his Twitch channel in the notes. Back in July of 2024, Milligin and I had conversations, about 6 hours worth, about the usefulness or lack thereof of tier lists, in general, and for DRG weapons in particular. The conversations got pretty convoluted, complicated, and involved a lot of different takes. It all started because in my Finding DRG People to Play With is Too Much Like Dating video, I made the offhand comment that tier lists were useless. I said that I wanted to do more with it in a conversation with Milligin, and Milligin took that and ran with it to do extra research with his old comp friends in fighting games. He cheerfully brought all of that back to talk with me about, but that went in all directions. We did try one final conversation, hoping to touch on all the points that we'd made before. Editing it was rather daunting, as it was more than an hour long, and I'm used to doing content-related videos that are about 10 minutes, so I kept avoiding it and hoping that I'd find or figure out a better way, but I never did. So, I sat down and finally got through the entirety of our final attempt on what we thought about tier lists. A little of it might be dated about where DRG is presently, but the guts of the discussion are still here and solid. And when I listen through it all, this really does represent a more refined version of all that we were thinking. In the background, I start with a deep dive where Whirl, Pike, Olaf, and I went into it for a lark, as 4 scouts, going as fast as we could. Then it's the first 3 missions of the Year of the Snake seasonal content, and finally the end of a Dreadnought mission that Millie came in on, and the two of us were just hanging out in the space rig to talk. They're just for the fun of it, and to have something to watch if you're into watching while you listen to 2 friends enjoy talking with each other. We both had a lot of fun with these conversations, so sit back and relax. I hope this deep dive is easy listening as we follow all our thoughts about tier lists and their consequences.
Talking to them about tier lists and gaming, both, like, I guess any shape does take, general
Right,
gaming tier lists.
because of characters and everything else
Yeah,
that
we
happens.
we discuss specifically, like, ones like tier lists of items in roguelikes, like Risk of Rain 2 or Binding of Isaac.
Oh, right.
That's like a personal list people make. How are those valuable? And then something that's very universal and seemingly necessary for those communities, that is like a fighting game tier list of characters.
Right.
It's like almost a required aspect of that community, whether it's helpful or not, they exist.
Well, then in DRG, there's always the overclock tier lists.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, I guess, other tier lists I've seen have been like mission types or like weapons or like
hmm
that
Mission
kind of thing.
types, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen somebody do a weapon one, but I see that they exist, the tier list for them.
Yeah, exactly.
They like a bug tier list,
Oh,
for I've used it myself to show like enemy priorities before.
right. Target
Um,
priority.
and some people have done that as well. And um, yeah, and then joke ones like beers or whatever have you. Or, you know,
I like the beer ones from
yeah.
drilling. That was a no, okay. No, cool. Yeah. And so, right. Because we were thinking, I was saying that tier lists were useless, but your friend had a really good point about being able to learn from any.
Yeah, the idea of learning from information just generally, and the tier lists provide some information.
Yeah.
Um, I guess regardless of what the creator or the discussion around them is, there's information to gain from it.
Yeah. Oh, and including the conversation sometimes about them, right? because there's always arguments that happen after.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another point that he was trying to make, my friend, that the discussion is often the value
Yeah.
of the tier list over the tier list itself, or your own independent thoughts. It's like what you can gain from the arguments involved, I guess.
Right. No, that was the thing that I had noticed a lot about tier lists was that usually the product of them is that because it's an opinion, everybody else can state their opinion, either opposed or with or around. That's always an interesting. I think that is a useful byproduct often of actually questioning your own assumptions, experience. I don't know, your own judgment of a situation and go, okay, wait, there might be another way of looking at it.
You mean like if you were making a tier list and then you made it and then you learn from the response to it?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Or if somebody else has made a tier list that you vehemently disagree with,
Yeah,
talking with them about it and going, okay, well, where did you get that? Or how did you get
yeah,
that?
yeah, that's pretty constructive, definitely.
I think that can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think often it isn't because of um, uh, people are not trying to learn.
No,
I mean,
this
this
is
is
true.
this I guess veers directly into the problem with tier list
Yes,
stuff. So I
exactly.
guess I'll
Let's
try to
go.
stay out of that. The
Well, I
the
don't mind.
silver lining of it. I mean, we'll double back to that because that's a big
Yes.
part of the problem. But I mean, yeah, if your intent is to learn from, if you're the tier list maker, I think often you're probably not thinking, I can't wait to get comments to tell me what it
What's
actually should
wrong
be.
with it? Yeah.
That's like crazy. But I mean, if you're able to make it and then have an enlightened view of people's suggestions, then you could definitely learn from it. I would say that that's probably good if you
Oh, that's
agree to do
interesting.
that when you put it up. I just think a lot of people aren't. But
No,
yeah,
that I
you definitely
agree. I
can.
agree. No, that's so
Yeah.
funny because that's one of the reasons why I would never make a tier list. Is like I wouldn't even think of. Oh, that's so funny. No, because the
Yeah.
main reason I would never think of making a tier list, I think, sounds a lot like one of the reasons why you wouldn't, which is because it's going to be wrong in various
Mm.
situations or for various people. And
Yeah.
if I offered a tier list, I'd be always like, well, I know this doesn't work or this isn't as good in these situations or on these missions or in this or whatever. And so I couldn't do it to begin
Hmm.
with. Whereas the idea of actually now I'm actually thinking about, okay, if I make a tier list going, hey, I want to learn from you guys about how this is wrong. That might be a funny way to go at it. I hadn't even thought of that.
I guess my problem with that is you can be led astray worse, I guess
Oh yeah.
in the situation where you set out to do this, like make
Yeah.
something and then your real intent is that you're gonna make it but other people improve it, like the stone soup or something.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the problem is that
It can
the
get
people
different.
you interact with it are you can't be sure that their information is any more correct than yours.
Right. No, that makes
You
sense.
then have to exercise the other part of it, which is being able to prune useful stuff off of it without being poisoned by that information. And I think that is
Yeah, that's
very
rough.
difficult. I mean,
Well,
like,
people
how are you gonna
come,
know?
right. And people come to tier lists in order to go, okay, be told what's best,
Hmm.
right? And if I make it in a sense where it might not, where even if I don't think it might actually be correct, that's a problematic.
Oh, I guess so, yeah. I mean, that's true. I didn't consider that.
Yeah, that's another aspect of the. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting, but yeah.
I don't know. If you have a scenario where you are doing this idea where you're making it and then you want to learn what's wrong with it, there can be times where you take this and appeal to somebody who you understand is has a better understanding, than you do
Yeah.
about it or whatever, and then
Hmm.
they can correct what's wrong and give you examples. I
No,
guess
that
that
makes a lot of
works
sense.
okay. Yeah.
But that only
But then they're just changing your tier list into theirs. So,
right. That's the interesting thing. But yeah, because it's really speaking from my own experience. Okay, that's interesting. Because yeah, I mean, I would always have if there was something that I needed fact checking, I would totally go probably first to my Olaf because I'm so close to him, but then also to you
mhm.
and to Axis and or Benny or other people. And it's interesting that I automatically try to learn from people who have more experience than I do and go, hey, what do you think? I mean, that was what was so fun about going over the target priority tier list you and I were talking over, and how when watching how it changed as you were explaining it.
Yeah.
I loved that.
I guess that's the what can we say about shifting tier lists as far as being good? There's some stuff I can say about bad
Yeah.
aspects. We're doing, I guess, we're doing the what's good about tier lists first here.
Oh, sure. Let's talk about what's good about tier lists first.
Okay, so we got there was
Yeah.
some
What
points just
was there
now about
else?
what was good, and the shifting stuff. What's good about tier lists being not rigid? Um,
Oh
I
no, there was that one other point though about how tier lists could be good was that your friend was saying that they were good because he could figure out the information that was good or bad from it. But we both observed that that's only from somebody who's very experienced. And
yeah,
so if people come to a tier list that are brand new, they can't make those distinctions the same way, right?
no,
And therefore, tier lists automatically will be biased, or if they're coming to it to be told the truth, they get bamboozled, or they get automatically misled because it's really about an opinion, not about what is about the game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's part of the problem with what's good about the exercise of interacting with tier lists from every perspective is the good part is if you have a healthy mindset about it and are trying to like I don't know experiment on this piece of information for yourself,
Right.
then you're going to gain something from it. But the requirement for that is like you already didn't need a tier list, probably because your mindset approaching this is already really elevated. You probably didn't need a tier list to do this. You're
Yeah.
probably thinking so critically and deep about this stuff that the tier list is not even a super effective way for you to learn. But sure ahead, like sure, go ahead and do that and learn from that way. You can. But
Right.
they can also a person that smart can probably glean information in better ways than that. But I think from that perspective and tying it to what you just said, like a first experience, right? So you have a person who's like really intelligent about games and game theory and has a good mindset, and they come to a new game and they have no idea anything about it.
Oh, right.
And they can get a tier list and then dissect it, right? And they can use their understanding of like a meta understanding of gaming to unpack value from it. And
Yes.
it's not bad at all. That person's probably making good use of their time, taking 10 minutes and doing that with some players' tier list. I mean, again, you're challenged to, in that moment, recognize what's the value of this person and their tier list. How can I trust them? But like, if your understanding is enough, then you can probably just be like, I don't know. I can just assume they're just a guy and they maybe don't know the best, but let's see what the game's about.
Right. Exactly.
So you can unpack it that way. But I mean, that's like sort of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
The
Yeah,
the
so
problem with doing it as a new experience and that person having bad what was it? Not bad habits, but they're getting the wrong idea off the
yeah,
gate.
exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely a negative. That's in the negative camp for sure.
I agree.
I'm not sure if there's a good way to spin that.
No, I don't think there is. And it's okay to not. I don't.
Yeah, I guess the shifting tier list stuff. So I would say
Yeah, that's a fun one.
I think that the good part of a shifting tier list is a meta reflection of a community, right? If
Yes.
you have these usually happen in like games where they're a power scale of a character or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when a tier list shifts, it doesn't really make the previous information incorrect. And I think that's probably a general assumption that a lot of people who don't look at it very critically think like, "Oh, that's old. That's wrong." Well, no.
Right.
That's totally not the right way to think about it at all.
Yep.
You know, I think that it's older and it's previous. It's a reflection of the
The state of
cumulative
the
value of everybody, right?
right and the state of the
And
game at
that's
that
like
time.
that's
Yeah.
like super important. Actually, like it can be a huge scrub mistake to
Yeah.
say this is old and therefore less valuable because then you're writing off the differences in the tier list as being, oh, this character moved down and that one moved up. The one who moved down sucks. It's often just super polarized, and those people suffer by looking at changes and thinking the new one, the most recent one, is the most accurate. And they'll get blindsided by the fact that they're not polarized in skill. They're not like the best player in the world where it matters.
Right.
So they will lose to these characters that
Yeah.
they've seen shift or fall off in the meta, and then have an emotional reaction. I'm going like super specific to describe a
Yeah.
fictional
Yeah.
character here, but this person exists. Like a huge swath of a player base for a competitive game is this person I'm talking about.
Yep.
And it's all because their mentality is wrong at the get-go about perception,
Yeah.
you
Or
know?
how to play. Yeah. That
So
particular
the
character.
the shifting tier list is
Interesting.
this ability, if you can shift with the tier list and recognize the individual tier list as being separate and valuable, it helps your mentality, because you can lose to something you shouldn't.
Right.
And that's a pretty big value. So that's in the competitive character tier list for like fighting games or something. That's a little bit off base from the
Well, but
DRG
I think it
guns, but
applies too. I mean, because part of why you might lose with a character that lose to a character that has fallen off is also because of how you played against them, right? Or how your
yeah.
attitude is
Oh
for
yeah.
them, or all these other factors. Because different people
Absolutely.
play so differently.
I mean, if you respected the character, there's a
Yes.
much better chance that you win
Win.
against the character. Yeah.
I
But
like that.
because of all these things adding up, you have a bad mentality. You don't practice against the character. You don't even think about the character. You don't have no idea what the character is going to do. And then in the moment when you're faced with the task, you're thinking, God, why do I have to do this? This character sucks. That has never helped anybody win,
No,
ever, in the
never.
history of ever. So yeah, no, it's very self-defeating for sure. And tier lists kind of enable that. And if you're have a healthier mindset about it, it can help you avoid it. You can see where problems are going to be. I mean, knowing what characters are low tier and moving around there can help you be like, I really need to have a plan for this, at some point.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
But I don't know, abstracting that idea into the roguelike tier list or into DRG, I think very briefly I'll say like Sabata is across the board in DRG. Sabata is um, kind of critically panned. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people don't like it. Well, there are problems,
Mm-hmm.
and it loses as far as opportunity cost to these things, and you can evaluate it, right, and put
Right.
it lower down than other things. But to put it there forever and not pull it out of the box and try it is to be self-destructive because
Yes.
there are times where it excels.
Yep.
There are things that it does very well, and even at the highest level, it can function in kits to do something that you don't have access to otherwise, you
Right.
know?
Well, and it
And so in
plays,
that way, to like disregard it completely is to hurt yourself, you know?
yeah. Because I know some people for whom that the Sabata works really well with their playstyle
Hmm.
compared to the other secondaries. Yeah, I have been enjoying the weapons maintenance just because it's making me play things that I don't normally play. And I'm going, oh hey,
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
this isn't
I
so
feel
bad.
like that's a success for that
I agree.
content edition for sure.
Yeah, and it does. I don't know. It does help bring to light for me the idea that because of good game design, tier lists should be harder in DRG. I
Oh,
mean,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like it is just harder in DRG because they have balanced so many of the weapons and the overclocks well against each other where the trade-offs are real, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it is a very big challenge to make a meaningful tier list in that game because qualifying what you're talking about is so all over the place, you know? Like if you're talking about the value of weapons, it's just such a massive undertaking because of the directionality of what you're talking about being good.
Yes.
You know, I think that generally people would assume, oh, well, I'm talking about the weapons ease to make me win, you know?
Yep.
That's generally what people are trying to say. Okay, well, that orients it quite a bit better, you know, but still, there are a lot of factors that can change that. How much are you going to have to work as an individual in that mission?
Right.
Because if you have other people of varying degrees of skill, it actually changes quite a bit your impact with these specific tools that you have, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not being talked about on tier lists.
At
It's
all.
not asking you how much are you going to have to carry with this gun. You know, that changes the meta ideas
Immensely.
of what you're
Yeah.
gonna do. Yeah, a lot. And if like you're not having to carry it all, then you can these it looks like this. If you are gonna have to carry it, it looks sort of a little differently, you know.
Right. And none of
And
them
then
actually talk about console either. And if you're actually a console player and trying to use
hmm,
a controller, some of the weapons are way better for you than others
oh yeah,
that aren't so true when you're playing PC. So yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting.
I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah,
That's true. I'm sure there's easier guns to approach depending on manner of play.
exactly. Or
And then there's like speed, I
yep.
guess, slightly changes things and I don't know. It just depends. I think that's something even as like enemy diversity impacts it, which you can't really necessarily plan for, but it is something that is a part of the equation.
Yeah.
Like Mactera Plague, nobody's making a tier list for Mactera Plague best weapons efficacy stuff, but like if you are doing something like that, it changes the value of what you're taking. Some things like Snowball become instantly way
Way
more
more.
successful than they are normally, and it's a good overclock. Normally, okay, sure, but then it comes online and it is instantly just trivializing all the encounters. Well, the thing is, it doesn't even have to be Mactera Plague. You can just randomly get more seeded Mactera waves in general, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
And if you're just experiencing a bunch of Mactera all the time, all of a sudden this would have been better in this scenario, you know?
Yep.
So it's kind of, you know, it's shifting a lot. Like, nobody's, I guess, evaluating every single thing based off of its individual merits like that in these scenarios. It's such a massive undertaking, but that's what it would be to be
A
accurate, I
meaningful.
think,
Yeah.
you know?
No, I agree. And it's interesting to talk about. I think there'd be more value in talking about each weapon and all of the things that it's good at and bad at as just, and not as a direct comparison against other things. One of the phrases that you said earlier that really stuck with me was that, like, Lazy Maybe does a really good job of presenting the data as it is and then ends up giving an opinion at the end. which kind of
Yeah.
ruins it.
Well, I think okay, hold on.
We can not
I
exactly
didn't
that.
throw
No,
him under the bus,
no, no,
okay?
no, no, no.
But let me explain two things.
Yeah.
First of all, let's split this up really quick. That is one thing that my friends said as well, is that it would be better to make individual. He was talking about for Street Fighter as an
Oh,
example.
right,
He
right,
was
right.
saying like a video about Ryu and full depth on that character is almost always more informational and a better resource than a character tier list, right? So he's
Yeah.
saying if you could make a character video on every character in the game and tier them in that video, it would be a better piece of content than a tier list. But a tier list is 10 minutes and the other thing is 30 hours,
That's
you know? And so
Amen. Okay.
I agree that like there's this separation here where there's one quality piece of work that's way better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if we're comparing types of content to each other, it's like almost certain that you would want to avoid doing a tier list. We'll double back to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this tier list negative aspect of why do tier lists exist then.
Yes.
So, but yeah, that was the same idea, which is like you can have something focus on these objects within the tier list and evolve from that, you know. So that is also when I was doing my research for this topic, something I had somebody. It's just like being honest with the subject matter, and if you put that above everything else, you become a scientist, and then you interact with only the people in your lab, you know.
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, you can get to the truth that way.
Mm-hmm.
But the tier lists are the opposite of the truth, you know? It's just they're
Yeah.
not focused on that. They're trying to be widespread. So the comment about like Lazy's working in the lab
Mm-hmm.
trying to get this information, but a part of getting those videos across is just washing his hands of one subject and going on to the next in each video. You know, here's a piece of information about a patch or something that changed. Here's the indexical stuff about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then here's like a little 5 second synopsis of my opinion of how much that matters for the game. Because it feels like, I mean, maybe he feels that it's necessary to qualify that information in the scope of his video, right? How much did
Right,
that
right,
patch
right, right.
matter? You
Uh-huh.
know, and he wants to put off, compared to all the other stuff I had my hands on now, this is how much that mattered,
Yeah.
you know. But that is it is a personal thing. But I guess for him to confine the scope of everything in the game, it has to be interacted with that way. But it does put this individual thing onto it, you know, his own
Right, right,
opinion.
right, right. No, okay, no, that makes more sense. Cool, cool. I like the
Sorry,
idea of the
information
indexing as the
blasted on
opposite
that,
of
but
the
I had to
tier
had
list.
to do it.
No, that's good. You did. No, it's good to clarify.
You know, I guess I should get into one as an example
Mm-hmm.
of one that I disagree with. You know, the one in Lazy's video where he talks about changes, I don't even remember what patch this was, but there was one where we lost a guaranteed better choice on the boomstick for Scout, okay?
Mm.
Tier 2 has reload speed versus attack speed. What is it called? Rate of fire.
Right.
And the rate of fire was like crazy, but
Mm.
rate of fire also affected inherently in this gun, it affected the reload animation speed.
Right.
So Lazy talks about this and he spends like 15 seconds on it and then moves on because he said that it doesn't matter. I disagree. They added into the game a system forever that takes this into consideration for that gun and I think one other where they added this mechanic that forces your reload to have a delay. Because rather than fix this interaction, they added this weird buffer cap thing so that you can't exploit that. Um,
Oh.
and so beyond that, you know, I think just the opinion of saying like this doesn't matter at all. Well, I do feel that the gun is has a more diverse choice, right? Because part of the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
problem was that you should never take reload speed
Right.
because the other one was just strictly better,
Better. Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you can take reload speed, but the problem
Mm.
is sort of to say that it doesn't matter is the same problem that I discussed with the tier lists. Is this was the old tier list, throw it in the trash can.
Right.
I don't think that looking at the game in isolation like that
From.
is the way to do it. So that's where we disagree, you
Hmm.
know, and that's a part of me saying this is an opinion on something that is indexical, right?
Right.
Here's something that changed. 10 seconds about it. I don't care. I don't think it matters. Let's move on to the next thing. For me, that doesn't align.
Right.
But, you know, I also respect that that type of information has to be handled that way by everybody. It's not just like an individual
Yeah.
thing, like, you know, so that's sort of an example of the whole discussion.
Oh, that makes sense. Because
Okay.
basically the opinion, yeah, did away with all that history, and then also how that changed the mechanism for the other weapon as well.
Yeah, and I mean,
Hmm.
like, you can just disregard it because it's true. This is what happened, and now there's more variety,
Variety,
right?
yeah.
And it doesn't really matter in the now, but I do think that it did matter, and it's a significant gameplay change for a lot of people who were
Stuck.
abusing the
Just the
previous one.
one.
And what does that mean for it? I feel like there's I think there's an extension of it, but it's not at all related to the black and white. This was then, here is now, which you can say in 10 seconds. Hey, this
Yes.
thing got nerfed, you know? And so like that's sort of like a I don't know. You can expand on these things. That's like going into the lab and
Hmm.
looking into it more, you know? So I don't know.
Every
That's the
single
whole thing.
detail. Interesting. So now tier list's bad.
Tier list
Because
bad.
we kind of touched on it already.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Because it
Tier
is
list
opinion.
bad.
It's like, oh.
All right, you tell me. What do you think? What makes all tier lists bad?
I touched on some of it earlier, which is that none of them are accurate
Okay.
in many situations. I think the other big thing was that it is all about opinion, and it's sometimes opinion that's stated in order to fish out interaction or in order to get traction with content. I mean, it's basically how the algorithm works, is all
Hmm.
in favor of tier lists. It's just about trying to argue with people about stuff.
Yeah, that sort of splits into two negatives
Yeah, yeah,
for me.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That individual one definitely splits into two, but that's fair. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, yeah. And the third one, I mean, beyond, okay, it's just wrong. It's like, it's so hard for me to go past that. Um, I think the third one is that it reduces games to
Mm.
being good or bad. I mean, all the mechanisms and tools and weapons and characters and things that can be found in a game to just being what's good or what's bad or what's meh, right?
Yeah.
And I hate that because there's so much nuance that's possible in the experience of a game that tier lists just reduce down to S, A, B, C, D, or whatever, right? Or
Yeah,
F.
why just have S? Just cut the bottom ones off. Who even cares about those? You know, why'd you even make the rest of the game?
Exactly. Why even make the rest of the game? And I'm like, I hate that about tier lists so much.
Yeah, all right. So A was in
they're
wrong information, or
right.
the first one. One was wrong information. Two was expected community response and the algorithm,
Right, right, right.
right? And then three is it's
And they're more yeah.
minimizing
Yeah, minimizing the game or the experience
the
within the
game,
game.
or
Yeah.
experience. Okay.
Because I think with two also, the most popular tier lists are the ones that state a controversial opinion.
Sure. Sure.
Because it's
Yeah.
just fishing for the arguments.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend hours on that on number two for sure. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's the landscape we live in, really, about it. is driven off of that online for sure. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The content rewards this, so there's more of it. And if that
Right.
thing is bad as an outcome, then there's just more bad stuff, and people try to drive it to be the worst part of it, because that's what's driving the numbers up.
Yes. Well,
So,
and it's interesting
yeah.
too that, well, so this was something that Pooch Barber had brought up, was that some people will take somebody else's tier list and go, okay, see, I'm right in an argument, going, this is proof that I'm correct on saying that this thing's trash or this thing's really great, right?
Hmm.
And using a tier list, which is nothing but an opinion, as quote unquote proof, which that drives me mad. That's a different problem.
Yeah, I don't know where that falls in. I think that's in number two somewhere
It might be,
in
yeah.
community response. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to see if there's something I can add to it. I think that a lot of mine fall into the second category
Yeah,
or
how
into
did
the
you split
first
it?
one that it's just wrong. There's just wrong information. It's a bad place to try to present an index. It's a bad place to
Yes.
present truth because it's just made to be subjective. And I think a lot of people engage with it without knowing this first. I think a lot of people engage with it in good faith and accidentally have, one, two, or three happen.
Right.
Minimize the game, say something wrong, and are doing it for the wrong thing, but they don't know any better. I think that it can happen very organically that people create tier lists or engage with them in that way, and it happens. It's just they're not made to be. I don't know. They're just a natural thing for people to do is rate things against each
Yes.
other. But unfortunately, doing it doesn't really benefit very many people unless you have an extremely healthy mindset about looking at it. And I think a part of that is to understand how inherently evil they are. Honestly, I don't think, like my friend's saying, like you can digest these things and gain from them if you can pull them apart. Well, I think a part of that is being immune to the poison, that's inside
Yeah.
them. I think you have to understand how to prune the information out and avoid the other stuff. And I mean, like, there's a turn off the monitor side to this for sure, where it's like,
Yeah. But
don't involve yourself so much emotionally into these things because they're meant to be just frivolous information. And I think that's a little disingenuous because if you aren't caring about what you're engaging with, why are you doing it? I guess if you're idly passing the time, God, why are you watching a tier list to do it? You could watch like a YouTube video of like boats sailing around, you know? You could watch like nature videos or something. You could
or
watch a
the gameplay,
documentary.
right? The
Or gameplay, sure. I'm just gonna pick
yeah,
out your
exactly.
human
Those are healthier
activities.
things to do.
If you're just idly wasting away, then don't do it watching somebody describe every item in Binding of Isaac and rate
Yes,
them.
or risk
Like
of
that's
rain,
crazy.
or yeah.
Don't make me out to be the bad guy because I care about the content. You're the one watching these tier lists with no reason. So yeah, that's the other part of it. But I think I agree. One, two, and three. I don't think I have another category I can really add for what's bad. I think that's a good
Yeah.
summation of
But you
them.
said you'd split two into two different things. What were the two different things?
Well, I think there's the content engagement algorithm aspect of tier lists. I put as its own thing where it's just like I'm making this because I feel pressured to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different thing outside of the scope of what's bad about tier lists, but it's also bad, that you feel compelled to make one
Yeah.
because
Because everybody
they do this.
does.
But I think that I separate that from a bad tier list can make people feral, you know,
Right.
and make people pick up the pitchforks. I think that's separate. It's in the same category as that when you describe them, but I think it's different than the like motivating people to be very nasty to each other.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
sort of related.
Because I wonder. I don't know. maybe there are some people who create tier lists in order to have people pick up pitchforks. That's
Yeah.
oh, I hadn't
I
even
mean, they're sort of related, right? Because,
they
like, if
are,
you
yeah.
want the video to succeed and you are, I mean, you have two paths.
Mm-hmm.
You can, in earnest, try to make the one that you think is accurate, right?
Right.
Even if you know how foolish it is. I'm making a tier list. I know I'm not right about it. There's something I'm gonna overlook. Other people will correct me on it, but I'm doing the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Good job. You tried the best that you could. Unfortunately, they are what they are. They're tier lists, so it doesn't matter. But, you did it in good faith, and this thing came out, and, it has varying degrees of success, whatever have you.
Right.
There's the other side, which is I'm going to make this purely because I think it would be a content driver. Tier lists are engagement baits. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't even really care about the information in it so much. Now, I don't think there's very many people out there who are just like purposefully trolling their tier lists. I think often people set out with either the A or B idea that I just described and end up on the A track, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because they're like in the process of making this thing, they're gonna still make it,
Right.
the way they think. But it's still like they're two different tier lists for sure because the end product is just like somebody with their mouth open on the thumbnail, just like pointing in the background, and it's the most like heinous tier list in the thumbnail that you could possibly see.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know. I think that's just like that
Yeah.
might be Pitchfork, right? That might
Yep.
be Pitchfork bait. They're trying to make people mad.
I love the idea of separating the tier list from the indexing, and that the indexing is content that is its own value and
Yeah.
source. And that makes so much more sense to me.
I think the best index for these things, unfortunately, this is kind of an eye roll take, is that it exists in the space that it does as is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the way the best index in a fighting game is the character select screen. There's no inherent value spread. It's just here are the characters.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really do anything as far as inform people. But I'm just saying, like, the best way to interpret this data is to just present it as is.
Mm-hmm.
And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, we talked about going into individuals and talking about strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
But the index has to be separated from value. It has to just talk about what these things are.
Yeah. Versus the
So,
values that are assigned, which I
mhm.
guess is how this whole conversation started.
I mean, if you think about something like I'd say this, and it might be kind of confusing. Did he just say take away the tiers from the tier list and just have the items? It's not exact. What I mean is, like, if you compare a tier list of a weapons or overclocks from DRG to something like Carl GG that is a build
Oh, yeah.
maker online. Like Carl GG doesn't do this with a value system. It's saying here are the components of the game. You can put together a build.
Yeah.
And maybe that data itself has value over statistics or even an individual player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A player makes a set of builds on Carl GG and they do it in earnest. Well, now you have that player's tier list abstracted. They didn't try to sensationalize this, likely, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
just making this information in a different way, you know? And it's not just S, A, B, C, D,
No.
it's presented in a different way. And I find that that's closer to
Oh, what you'd really like. Yeah.
it's closer to information that's helpful. I mean, immediately you should be able to present this to somebody and say, "Here's a build for the
Yeah.
character." And it's like, is this build good or bad? And it's like, now we're getting into the discussion. But
Yes,
here it
exactly.
is. Here's the build.
Here's the build.
This is
Here's
what
what you
I
can
would
try out.
play or whatever.
Yeah.
Or
Hmm.
you should play. You're new to DRG. Here's a build.
Here's a build.
So,
It's useful. Or can be. Yeah, because Servens builds, his build videos
mhm.
don't do valuation. They're just like,
These are
these are the
things. Yeah.
thing. Here's a thing. Here, try it. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I found it
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I really
Definitely.
love that. Yep. Yeah, that was interesting.
Let's see. We did the community stuff a little bit. We
Hmm.
just did some more of point one. What was point three? Oh, the minimizing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one because I only really have one piece I can say about this, which
Hmm.
is if you have an evaluation of good and bad as a player, what do you want from that? In fighting games like you're in, it's very easy in this. If you have a character spread of and some characters at the bottom or some are at the top, what do you want? Do you want them to all be A? Do you want them to all be in the same tier? What is the objective of the players want from this? Now I know that they're not like asserting their wants from a tier list. They're saying, I want this character to be at the bottom or I want them to be at the top. They make it based off their opinion. But if it is sort of disregarding these characters at the bottom, what does each person individually want that to change to be? Some people really don't like the top tier characters being as powerful as they are, and they don't care at all what
Mm.
happens to them at the bottom because they've already disregarded them, right? It's already
Hmm. Hmm.
minimized the game.
Exactly.
And some people would like the bottom characters brought up, you know.
Yeah.
But I guess if you are evaluating these things, for me, I think that no matter what happens, you're gonna have ones at the top and ones at the bottom. They're just gonna be different flavors,
Yep.
you know? And as a player in that environment, you kind of just choose how you interact with it. Am I gonna be a low tier player that's going to be part of my personality? I'm going to play this bad character, or I'm going to only play the top tier characters. I don't know. I guess what do you want from the game if the tier list is this way? Because, it's not a static thing. The games do change and the devs might see player response and be like, "Oh wow, this
Right.
character's way too strong,"
Hmm. Hmm. I mean,
and
that's
and
what
change off that.
Rainbow Six does all the time is
Hmm.
find the top tier players, figure out exactly which characters they're playing and which ones they're not, and then map it out and then do all their balancing based on that. So then the tiers change every season,
Hmm. Yeah.
which I mean has its own quirks. You can use that as data to figure that out, to try to make it so that people don't minimize the game to only the popular characters. But
Hmm. Yeah, I have an opinion on this that I won't share for myself.
yeah, feel
That
free.
would just make people probably close the tab. So I'm gonna let you run with just yours, and that's fine. We won't worry about my take on
I
this.
don't
But
care. No, I'm interested in however
no,
it
I mean,
goes.
I just everybody has. I think everybody's right about what they want for the game. You
Yeah.
know, and I think you can exist and have an opinion of, oh, I really wish the devs would change this. My character is really bad, or my characters are too good. They need to nerf them.
Hmm.
I think everybody's right to have that opinion on the game, but I think the game is also right to exist the way that it is
This.
currently,
Yes.
And I think the tier list minimizing the game aspect, it can be rolled directly into how you want to interpret this piece of content. If you didn't have this understanding, I mean, people are still going to play the game and say, this character makes me so mad and is way too strong.
Hmm.
It needs to be nerfed. That's regardless of tier list. People are just going to have a personal,
Opinion on that. Yeah. Yeah.
opinion on that. And they can want that to change. And I guess the question is, um, should that be something that changes? If so, how much? And not just how much do you want it to change? If you can take yourself out of the equation, how much should the devs of your game be influenced by this collective opinion? You
Hmm.
know, and I don't think they should be influenced by it as much as other people want them to because of their own
Yeah.
personal vendettas about characters, right?
Yes.
That's generally where I align. I hope that generally the devs disregard the current meta. And I know people, that's probably, or I've already stepped too far down this road, probably.
It's a
But the
good road.
reason why I'm saying this is
Uh-huh.
because in a landscape for competitive games, you have very short windows for stuff to be um, what they are.
Right.
And I know people will be like, well, you should have seen Fortnite Season 7. It was absolutely crazy that this thing, and it stayed the whole season and they didn't change it. You should have played that. I'm like, sure. There's tons of these where these things need to probably get fixed sooner rather than later. And yeah, the best players in the world are going to find these metas really fast and abuse them for
Mm-hmm.
as long as possible. And that's really bad. I understand that. But the overarching meta for a game, the longer it has to evolve, there are counterplays that never get found because things shift so quickly, right? And metas can take a long time to adapt to the strongest character. Counterpicking can be something that takes a little bit longer than the meta strat being discovered, which could happen on day one. And I'm not saying that it's perfect that these overpowered things stay in the game and stay the meta, but I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
there is more balance to a system the longer it goes without change. And I think that recognizing, oh, this thing is a thorn in my side and it should be buffed or nerfed, there's a potential for the meta to like level out. Tier lists are a product of an ever shifting meta. The more the meta changes, the more design changes within the game, the more new tier lists pop up, you know?
Right. No, that's true. They're driven by changes in the game.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I don't actually think they're ever really that well identified because if you think about low tiers, that
Mm-hmm.
information is not represented very well. You can be kind of confident that a high tier S tier thing is well placed. Now, it might not be perfect. It could shift up and down. It may even shift down to A if it's
Mm-hmm.
S.
Mm-hmm.
But often, metas don't last long enough in online games that change with patches to say that this character that's D should be D. They could be B. They could actually be A. It just depends on somebody representing them at that level to push the boundary. And if
Right.
they don't last long enough, if seasons are too short, you don't know,
No.
you know.
Yep. You never know.
And that's a big part of counterplay. And so that's something I don't like about tier lists being this sort of written in stone idea. And often it's a scramble when a patch comes out for
There's
community representative
yeah.
scrambles to make a tier list about the information, and there's adaptations from that. There's high level of play to reinforce it.
Mm-hmm.
But those tier lists kind of, I think, just emphasize don't work on these things at the bottom. You
Yes.
know, they're down there if you want to succeed, which everybody's trying to win. Don't waste your time on these things. But I think those things at the bottom can have dramatic impacts on the entire meta.
Yeah.
So
I mean
I think
that's
that's part of the disregards a part of the game. I think it also disregards a huge part of meta development of a community, you
right.
know.
No,
So
that's
that's my
interesting.
whole thing about that.
I love that whole thing.
Okay, great. The longest side, and people might
That's a
be
good sign. Oh.
not agreeing with me saying don't patch Fortnite. I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
but that's so funny. The more balance, yeah, the longer it exists as it is. That's so funny. Because that's what I like. Oh. I know that a lot of people are complaining about how slowly DRG is getting updated, but I'm like, I've been enjoying it.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely a tough one,
It
because I
is.
want people to want to play the game, and there's no way I can convince them with just my words to be like, "Hey, stop what you're doing. Go back to play DRG even though there's no new content."
Yeah,
You know?
it is hard. Because there's
But
so
I
much
enjoy
treasure to
it. I mean,
discover.
that's up to for the person, but I enjoy playing the seasons more later into the season than right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I just I it snowballs for me. The longer the season lasts, the more I enjoy the actual game. Now the community
Yeah.
starts to fall off a bit because it gets really
Yeah, a lot of
everybody's
fewer people.
gone.
Hmm.
But as far as the actual gameplay, I start to really enjoy the last parts of seasons because they've been fully cooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good
Well, what
things.
can we say other stuff about the tier list stuff? Is there anything else we want to touch on with this?
Uh,
I guess what if you're each person in the scenario, this is what I like to think about. This is actually
mhm,
how I
mhm,
started the conversation when I did the research, quote unquote, huge air quotes, with my friends.
mhm, mhm.
Is imagine yourself as these people in the situation. You're devs of a game, you're players of the game, you're a content creator for the game. You know, you're somebody looking at buying the game. What
Right.
does the tier list look like to you? What does that mean to be that person in that situation watching a tier list about this subject matter in the game? Well, if that's the case, you can put yourself in all those scenarios. What is the like, I guess my sort of summarizing question for this is there's all these bad things that can occur from tier lists.
Right.
What does it look like to engage with them in the best way possible as those individuals?
Mhm. Mhm.
If you're a content creator making a tier list, what's the best way to do it? You've already said you're going to do it. How do you do it? You know?
Right. And I guess as a content creator, I I'd realize that what I really wanted to do was an index and not another tier list.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfectly valid
that's
answer for
that's
sure,
how
is you
I
just
go.
don't do it, right?
Yeah,
You
I
think
just went
you should and then you don't. That's part of this whole discussion, right? Is like they're
right.
bad. So I mean like you could avoid it. You
Yes,
could you could turn it into something else for sure,
that's
you
true.
know?
Could be a discussion about all the parts. Well, the thing is that I mean, I can see a tier list on a stream where you have interactions with other people in order
Hmm.
to frame it with more knowledge than what you alone
Hmm.
have. I
Yeah.
could see how streaming a tier list works better than just recording your own opinion.
I think if you can make the content about it and you're going to do it, like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying you're streaming it and you're having it being people engaging with it, if you're going to do it, if there's any way you can make it about something that's truly your opinion, right, and less about an index, that's better. Lean into the strength of what a tier list is. It's an
Ah,
organizer for your
yeah.
own feelings. So it could be something that's very subjective. Like I mentioned in passing, like the beers, right? Something
Right,
comical. If
right.
you can lean into more of that, that's great because it brings out the flavor in your personality, right? You
Yeah.
can have jokes about what if this, what if that, and it's constructive. It doesn't take away from the game. It actually builds on it, right? Like
Right.
the fan cannon. There's
Yes.
so much right that this goes in the opposite direction of what tier lists take away.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
are doing it in a way that's like, this is just totally me and it's goofy, it can still be engaging.
Yep.
People can laugh and say their own funny thing they want to add to it. So I
Exactly.
think it's a space for, as a creator, maybe look to do it with, um, you know, a bit of humor
Yeah.
rather
And
than
banter
this is a
or
serious idea I've been cooking up.
yeah.
This is the end all be all tears.
Mm-hmm.
Don't,
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
wrong direction. That's my
Yeah.
opinion
Oh,
about it.
that makes a lot of sense. Because if you present the information as, okay, this is, and repeatedly that it's just an opinion and not the be all end all, then I think that works out way better
And
for consumption on the far
yeah,
end. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think that if you're as a creator, you've made the pact with the demon, right? Like you want to make the content, you understand the nature of the beast. Well, understand even better. What does this mean? If I'm making a serious tier list, you get to make one of those, maybe two
Right.
of those, right? Like how many subjects do you have in the game to really be so serious about? I hopefully not a
Yeah.
lot because you're
Exactly.
really overusing the tier lists at that point. But if you have a goofy idea, think about how many opportunities that is to be unique and
Yeah.
and creative with that space. It's honestly the more you can come up with goofy ideas to make tier lists for,
Hmm.
the more engagement you can farm. And guess what? You're probably the only one. You know,
Yeah.
you're
And it's
probably one of the very few making this tier list of this type, and that's way more engaging than the thousandth overclock tier list.
yes. Amen.
So I think as a creator, if you're really doing this because you've been motivated by the algorithm or whatever have you, then play the game the best you can. Don't. I mean, I can understand you wanting to do the overclock tier list or whatever version of that is for the game, the character tier list,
Mhm.
because it's the rage bait, drive engagement, or you want to be honest with yourself, whatever. But I'm telling you, like the going after the goofy fun ones is equally as successful, and it can make it about you. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Because only
um,
you can be you. Yeah.
yeah,
That
only you
makes
can
sense.
be you. There's a chance for you to make peace with that idea at the same time.
And lean into that. Yeah. I like
As a
that.
player, uh, how do you deal with tier lists? I would say only use them to be familiar with a piece of content, right?
Yeah.
The safest time to engage with a tier list is while you're still very bad.
Mm-hmm.
Is while you're still very bad. The moment you're like, I'm gonna reply to this guy and tell him that I think that actually if you in your mind you're saying actually this is better or worse, you're too far. You should close that. You
Yep.
don't need to watch that video anymore. As a player, you're too far. Okay,
I
that
agree.
no longer gaining help from it. Or you can, be very stoic and find a way to be like my friend and gain information from it. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
You can digest it that way.
I agree. Totally. As a player. I think that is the only time when I do engage in tier lists is when I'm brand new to the game. I'm going,
Mhm.
okay, I have no idea what any of this is. So yeah, that makes so much sense. And
Have you
then
found that there's tier lists that you've watched as a player that you're like, wow, this was great? Can you think of any that you're like, that you would recommend, that you felt like helped you?
I think, well, I'm the so two tier lists stick in my head. One is the one you and I were going over for the target
Target
priorities.
priority
And it
stuff.
was
Yeah.
because it moved and because we talked about so many different things and so many situations and how a lot of the priorities change given your situation and what you're doing and where you are. And I
hmm
gained so much experiential knowledge from you during that whole discussion that it was wonderful. I loved that. And it was
Yeah.
less about the tier list and where it ended up or even
Yeah.
where it started than it was about the discussion, right?
Yeah, the tier list was more used as a conduit to show how things move in priority, because it ends up being like
Exactly.
a great tool to show value.
Uh-huh.
So in that way, it can show relative value changing depending on situations super well in isolation one
Exactly.
on one, but for this example, we had gone through every individual bug and shown where they go on a tier list of how important it is to kill them based off
Yes.
of their level of threat. So it's a very dynamic idea. It's not like
And it
a
was wonderful.
bulk detonator number one, it's not like that.
No,
It's
and that, I know. It totally subverted the idea of what tier lists are presented
yeah.
to be, which I loved. I mean, that was
Hmm.
what I got so much out of. And the funny thing is, the other one that I remember, because I don't look at a lot that were beneficial to me, but the one was Axis streaming his overclock tier lists and just being in
Yeah.
discussion with everybody about it and disagreeing vehemently with some of them and
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
having and him being very open about it being just an opinion and that this is
Yeah.
stupid and some parts of it are so stupid and he was willing to say no, this is a really stupid ranking but I'm putting it here anyway. And I'm like I was like, oh, this is an entirely different way of looking at tier lists. I can take this. But I
Yeah,
totally
that's
remember
good.
that one.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to get one that's like that, because I find like that's really in the area that's difficult, but you were
Yes.
able to, I mean, it reinforces the idea that deep down, the discussion you can have around these things can be useful,
Yes.
And that's good. I think often people get sidetracked by the fact that they're closing their ears and starting to type, and that's it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
no, it's good that you're able to do that
And that
way.
was
I think
very
for
early
me,
on for me when I didn't even know what all the overclocks were. So
yeah.
that helped a lot in categorizing,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
what are
that's
these
true.
things?
Very informational in that way too. I think for me, similarly, as a player, the one exercise I did gain a lot from, and I would say like I recommend it, is like I made my own tier list just to make mine. And I realized in the process of making an overclocked tier list how wrong I was going into it. Like at the beginning versus the end of the process, I was two different people,
Oh,
because
wow.
I went
Okay.
in with an idea of like this is the shape it's going to be, and these are the values, and then by the end, I was like, oh my God, the way I've been looking at this whole system was wrong.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that was helpful as a player just to make one,
Hmm.
and not necessarily engaging with other people's and being right or wrong or arguing with them, but just going through the exercise of being like, what do I actually pen to paper think?
Oh, I love
And
it.
then by the end being like, wow, okay, I had a totally different idea going in. Going out, I have to redo this whole thing.
Oh, wow.
This is
Yeah.
not it. So,
So even the conversation with yourself on it
yeah,
was very
yeah.
helpful.
I
That's
mean, I
cool.
think that's a big part of what people miss about engaging with tier list content. Unless somehow they've already done one for themselves, I would say a lot of people will go to a tier list and be like, this is where I find fault in it, but they haven't established that for themselves. And content creators experience this when going to do it. That's why I said the B content creator who's doing it for content ends up being the A, is because everybody funnels in the same direction where part way through the experience of making a tier list, they're like, how do I actually feel about this? The self-reflection part of it is
Yeah.
the is a genuinely good aspect if you can seek it. So that's a part of it for me. I definitely had an experience where I learned a lot from it, and I was asked to do it by another community member in DRG,
Hmm.
and I still am so thankful that he did get me to do it because I was like never gonna do something like that. And so yeah, no, I think that the process of making one just to go through the motions rather than arguing about 2 points on
Right.
somebody else's is pretty helpful, as a player.
I like
Can be good.
this.
Illuminating.
I love it. I like that we
Oh,
start with some of the good points of tier lists and we're ending on kind of some of the good points
yeah,
of tier
yeah.
lists. It's like, oh,
So who
yeah.
else does that leave? We did the creator, the player, and we got the devs. Was there
Did
another
we get
one?
the devs?
We haven't done the devs. We
I
still
don't
have to
think
do
we
the
did the
devs, but
devs. Yeah.
but is there another category that I forgot?
Because we have the new player. There's the regular player you already
Yeah, we
did.
kind
And
of
then, yeah.
yeah put them together. Yeah,
So I think there's just the devs left.
yeah, just the devs. So, what advice for devs? I mean, it's the category three about minimizing the game or influencing it. What do you think devs, if they see something like this about their game, what do you think the impact? How would you, as a dev, feel about that interpretation? What's a good way to look at that or not look at it?
So, depending on how they got to the tier list, whether there were other opinions involved, you always have to balance the idea that it's just a single opinion, right?
Hmm.
And then as a dev, I'd probably be reading all the comments to figure out how real this really was, and then
Hmm.
figure out against how I felt the game should be balanced, whether it made a difference or presented meaningful arguments as to what differences might need to be made.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
this being an example of that, would it be like you have intentionally designed things to fall in a space that is like the priority thing, right? An S or an A. Are people collectively seeing that as being the case? Are people interpreting your content as being this way, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Mm, partially. It's also, how, because it goes again with that initial evaluation of who's making this tier list, what
Hmm.
experience do they have, what situation are they coming from? Is that a situation I'm actually trying to address in the game?
Right.
Is their axis of good and bad the one that lines up with what I feel is appropriate for my user base?
Hmm.
And if it's off, how off, and which way do I bias what the
Hmm.
input is? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is because it is the good or bad, or how usable, or how if they're thinking of it in terms of how usable it is, how powerful it is against whatever enemy they have. Is that actually how I want it balanced, or is because
Yeah,
sometimes
that's right.
rating it low is not a terrible thing because that may be where I needed it to be,
Right.
right?
That's right.
And but it's a thing that you cannot use to evaluate how well your creation worked the way
That's
you
right.
expected it to.
So it should be maybe sometimes should sometimes be a confirmation of your ideas, right?
Yes.
And not every person is going to align perfectly
Yep.
with that confirmation. There's going to be a shotgun spread of that. But I guess it's rather than the tier list isn't reflective of the bottom is I don't like this. The tier list
Right.
should be reflective of the idea of this is just where this is where it should be, right? You
Right.
shouldn't feel like um I've messed up and these need to be fixed. It should
Right.
be like these are where I want them to be, you know? And if they're not, then you can kind of reflect on that idea,
Yeah.
right?
Then evaluate
Maybe.
on whether it
Depends.
needs to
Yeah,
actually be changed or not.
right.
Yeah.
And I think the balance part of it. Actually, I guess my advice for any dev is just close that tab.
Yeah.
Don't interact with your community in that way in any way, okay? And especially the idea, two things. The idea of intent. You know, this person doesn't understand your intent with the game. Okay, sure. And they're not going to. That's
No.
the separation
That's
between
all
you and
right.
the player, right?
Yep.
And so, in that way, if you say, well, they would maybe think about this differently if they understood my intent. Yeah, absolutely. Then they'd be you, you know?
Yeah,
But
exactly. But they don't. And
but
that's
they
okay.
don't, and like that's a whole part of that separation. You're the puzzle master, they're the ones playing your puzzle, right?
Right.
And so you should be okay with that separation. In that way, you should separate yourself from their feelings about this and say, I want what they're doing to align, what they're doing with their tier list or whatever their opinion is, that should align with where I want them to be. You know, because you're in control of that response somewhat. Everybody's going to have
Yeah.
like
Everybody has their own
positive or
responses
negative
to things.
reactions, you
Yes,
know, like
exactly.
you can't control the art at the end
Not
of the
at
day, all
all.
that stuff. But that should be reflective of where you want your pieces to land within your game, you know?
Right.
So, in that way, I guess the balancing thing, tier list should never make you want to balance your game better, okay? Because that's the ultimate trap. This is my one thing, okay? Don't ever look at this and say the bottom 20% that's in D, that's got to go up to B. Don't worry about it. There's going to be a bottom.
Yes.
And it is the way that it is. It shouldn't let you. People shouldn't motivate you to fix everything into the same conformed line. Okay,
Right. Exactly that.
It doesn't. It doesn't. You know, we all wish you could, and you
No,
wish you could, but
I
it's
don't.
impossible to do. It's not possible to do. People
No,
have spent their whole life going crazy trying to do it. Don't
don't do that.
let this waste your time because it's not worth it. You can, it's not possible.
Yeah.
And it's better for it to not be. You know, that discrepancy of value is a great flavor to the experience. If everything was on the same line, I mean, fundamentally the devs should understand this regardless, right? The balance
Yes.
thing is part of game design. But
Amen.
like, you know, it's okay to have the D. You know, it's okay to have the E and those exist. You know, that gives a weight to everything. It's
Yeah.
okay to have an S. You know, sometimes the
Well,
S gets a little crazy.
yep.
Sometimes it can be way too high, but you know, that's again aligning it with your own view. It's not how much things are E or S.
Yeah.
When you look at
Well,
these things,
yeah.
are the things in the right place, you
Well,
know?
yeah. And I would warn devs against trying to always nerf S's
Mm,
That's just bad business decisions. Because people, when they love something, there's a reason they love it. And to treat it as a emotional response
yeah.
to what they are. And it's not whether they are good or bad. It's for that particular person, it's good or bad. And that you may have designed the thing that they put in the D tier list to be really good for somebody else and for a
Mm,
completely different approach. So it's just an interesting, yeah, no. I like your main point as
yeah.
well
So the dev don't regard this content as anything
as a
except
directive, yeah.
is it a projection of what you anticipated for your pieces to be in the game, right? And if it's not, that's only that person's opinion. It doesn't really
Yes.
mean anything at all for the shape of your game, and it should not influence anything. And it probably wouldn't. But I'm just saying, like, I guess as a creator looking at the way your creation is interpreted, it can be difficult, right? Because people are, it's essentially people are grading you on your work. And it shouldn't be that. It should never be this is SAB. These are where I succeeded and these are where I failed. Okay? It should just be a reflection of where you made these pieces powerful and not. It doesn't have anything to do with your job or task. So trying to separate the community from the game. Because I feel like the tier list is one of the most damaging things for the community to the game designer. So I'm
Oh,
trying to separate that
interesting.
that
Okay, cool.
space a little bit. Just saying like don't look at this as an assessment of you and your craft. It's just if people rated chess pieces S to E.
Yeah.
Like just because the pawn has the least value doesn't make it an unviable piece.
Right.
That's crazy. So in your game, your weakest pieces are not an unessential part of the game. So
Right.
it's not a rating of your design, it's a rating of
Yep.
something else entirely.
It's on a
That's it.
different axis.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
love
that's
it.
it. That's all I got.
Okay. Oh. All right. I'll stop recording. This is good.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you learned something with us. Autogyro out.